There's a court process unfolding in Ontario right now that could have broad implications for vaccine mandates all across the province, perhaps all across the country, depending on how it's resolved. So last week, University Health Network had a deadline of last Friday for all of their employees to get vaccinated. UHN is a health hub that covers several hospitals and health institutes around the Toronto area. Of all of those employees that they have, the thousands of them, apparently about 180 of them had not yet been vaccinated by that Friday deadline for a variety of different personal or logistical reasons. 6 of those went to court and said, we are opposed to this vaccine mandate, we don't support it, and we want to take legal action on it. We want this to be shut down by the courts. Now, the judge, Ontario Superior Court Justice Sean Dunphy, he did not shut down the vaccine mandate, but he did issue an interim injunction pausing it. He said, we got to take a further look at this. We got to look at the details. We got to hash this out in court. UHN, their lawyers actually say that he has no domain over this, that the Ontario Superior Court doesn't have domain over the issue because it's a collective bargaining issue, just strictly between the employer and the employee, and collective bargaining rights and laws are what pertains to all of this. But the judge said, hold on, time out, I'm going to pause everything, including the firing of these employees. So basically, putting a pause on the vaccine mandate. Now, it only applies to those 6 employees and 19 others who are in the process of getting involved in the court action, so 25 out of the 180. And the judge made it clear. He said, look, this is not a ruling on the validity of the vaccine mandates. This is just an acknowledgement that this is a serious issue that we've got to discuss. And he said, look, someone losing their job over this, and these are people saying they actually pretty much have to now take the vaccine even though they don't want to because this threatens their livelihood, their ability to provide for their families and so forth, that this is a serious issue that the courts do need to unpack and need to address. So they're going to be back in court later this week looking at the details of it. It'll be really interesting to see what happens and which way they actually go, because of course there's a lot of strong perspectives and obviously emotions flaring when it comes to the issue of vaccine mandates, both those for it and those against it. One little interesting thing though that the judge said, he said, look, this idea of me pausing the vaccine mandate or pausing the terminations of these employees for a week, this shouldn't be seen as some sort of public health hazard because they are not scheduled to be working next week. So for them to stay employed, even though they're not vaccinated, the health question, that doesn't apply. But what's kind of interesting there, and even though he said he was not ruling on the validity of the vaccine mandate, he wasn't trying to unpack it in any way, by him even making that argument, that's kind of interesting because we have seen that when it comes to some mandates, like the federal government's one governing some federal employees, it actually applies to people who are doing work from home right now. It applies to some individuals who don't really physically interact with other people, but they could still stand to lose their jobs because of the particulars of that vaccine mandate. So I found that part kind of interesting there. He was already applying something of a logical lens to whether or not the mandates do or do not pose health risks and to what degree they do or do not reduce the spread of COVID-19 and so forth. So this will really be an interesting one to watch. What do you think about this? Vaccine mandates making their way to courts. It's no surprise it took a few months. A lot of the things that have been happening when it comes to COVID-19 the past year and a half, they're pretty hastily put together. I mean, it's very common to see in a provincial legislature or up federally, there's laws that get enacted, there's things that happen that are of far lesser consequence to our lives, and yet they take many months to develop, and they go through committee hearings, and they hear from stakeholders and so forth. But the things that have been going on the past year and a half, very momentous things that affect people in a very, very deeply personal way, they have basically just been introduced, with the snap of a finger. And we even saw Doug Ford and Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's top doctor, they had both said they were opposed to vaccine mandates being introduced in Ontario. They were opposed, of course, before they were in support of it. So a lot of stuff moving very quickly, a lot of arguments that maybe could have been made or should have been made that were not, and a lot of unpacking of the details that never happened. And maybe that's what's going to happen in this court process as it continues to unfold. Something to watch, for sure.